free. Go take your damn dead weight away now. Those words echoed off the Italian marble walls of the foyer as my ex-husband Malik screamed into his phone. He stood in the center of the living room, chest heaving, looking at me with pure contempt. He thought he was the king of Atlanta, finally evicting the woman who had held him back. He thought he was kicking me out of his multi-million-dollar mansion. He had no idea that in exactly 1 hour, his entire reality was going to crumble into dust. Before I tell you how I destroyed his ego, his bank account, and his family in a single afternoon, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind a man exactly who signed the checks. The ink was barely dry on the divorce papers. Malik tossed the Mont Blanc pen onto the glass coffee table with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. "Done," he said, leaning back and loosening his silk tie as he let out a long, exaggerated breath. Finally free. He looked at me, expecting tears. He expected me to fall to my knees, to beg him to reconsider, to ask how I was going to survive without his tech CEO salary. Instead, I stood up and walked over to the temperature-controlled wine wall. I selected a bottle of Screaming Eagle Cabernet, a vintage that cost more than the first car Malik ever owned. I popped the cork with a soft sigh, poured a glass, swirled it gently to let it breathe, and sat back down on the velvet sofa, crossing my legs. "Are you deaf, Tasha?" Malik snapped, his patience fraying instantly at my lack of reaction. "The papers are signed. You are no longer my wife. That means you are a guest. And as of right now, you are a trespassing guest. Get out." I took a slow sip of the wine, letting the complex notes of dark cherry and smoke settle on my tongue. "I am finishing my drink, Malik," I said calmly. "And I am watching the news." I picked up the remote and turned on the television, ignoring him completely. This sent him over the edge. He marched over and snatched the remote from my hand, hurling it onto the couch. "You are unbelievable," he shouted, pacing the room like a caged tiger. "I just closed a $10 million Series A funding round for my company, Tasha. I am a visionary. I am one of the top tech moguls in Buckhead. I need a partner who brings something to the table, not a silent mouse who sits around my house all day spending my money. I need energy. I need ambition. You are just dead weight." I almost laughed. He really believed it. He believed he was a self-made man. He didn't know that the venture capital firm that led his funding round was a subsidiary of a trust fund managed by my father. He didn't know that the investors only took his calls because my name was attached to his application, hidden in the fine print. He didn't know that this house, this car, and the suit he was wearing were all paid for by the deadweight sitting on his sofa. When he saw I wasn't moving, he pulled out his phone. "Fine," he spat. "If you won't leave, I will call the only person you might actually listen to." He dialed a number and put it on speaker, holding the phone up like a weapon. The line rang twice before a deep baritone voice answered. "This is Elijah." "Old man, come pick up your useless daughter," Malik yelled, not even letting my father speak. "I am done." I tried to be charitable. I tried to let her down easy. But she is sitting in my living room drinking my expensive wine and refusing to leave. I have entertained her laziness for 5 years, Elijah. 5 years. But now I am a millionaire. I have a reputation to uphold. Come get her before I throw her out on the street myself. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint hum of a boardroom in the background. My father was likely in the middle of closing a deal worth more than Malik's entire existence. Then Elijah spoke, his voice ice-cold and dangerously calm. "Is that so, Malik? You want me to come over?" "Yes, take her away now," Malik demanded. "I want this house empty in 1 hour." "Understood," my father said. 1 hour. Do not let her leave that house, Malik. Keep her right there." Malik hung up and smirked at me, a look of pure triumph on his face. "You hear that, Tasha? Even your daddy knows when to fold. He is coming to collect his burden. You have 1 hour to pack your bags. I suggest you hurry. I have family coming over to celebrate my freedom, and I do not want them to see your face." I checked my watch. 1 hour. That was plenty of time. I took another sip of wine. You better start packing. Malik sneered, walking toward the kitchen. I am going to open the good champagne. The stuff I was saving for a special occasion. This is the best day of my life. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. It wasn't my father. It was the invasion force. Malik opened the door, and in walked the circus. Mama Viola, wearing a hat so large it nearly scraped the doorframe, his younger brother Trey, who looked like he had just rolled out of bed, and Ashley, Trey's wife. Ashley was the kind of woman who thought she had class because she watched reality TV shows about real estate. She walked in, her eyes immediately scanning the room, calculating the value of everything she saw. "Thank you, Jesus, Mama!" Viola shouted, throwing her hands up. "My boy is finally free from that anchor." She walked straight past me as if I were a piece of furniture and hugged Malik. "I told you, baby. I told you she wasn't right for you. A man of your stature needs a queen, not a shadow." Ashley didn't even say hello. She walked into the living room, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood. She stopped in the center of the room and looked down at the silk Persian rug beneath her feet. It was a hand-knotted masterpiece I had sourced from an auction in Istanbul, valued at $50,000. Ashley wrinkled her nose. "Ugh, Malik. The first thing we need to do is get rid of this rug," she said, kicking the edge of it with her boot. "It is so dark and dated. It makes the room feel small. We need something modern, maybe some faux fur or a nice beige. And these curtains tacky. We are going to redo this whole place. I have so many ideas." Trey, get my tape measure from the car. Trey laughed, flopping down onto the armchair I had reupholstered with imported Italian velvet. "Yeah, bro. We are going to turn this place into a bachelor pad. Or maybe Ashley can set up her yoga studio in Tasha's old office. She never did any real work in there anyway." I sat there gripping the stem of my wine glass, watching them mentally divide up my property. They were like vultures circling a carcass, except the carcass was still alive and drinking Cabernet. Mama Viola marched into the kitchen and I heard the refrigerator door open. She came back out holding a bottle of Dom Perignon, my Dom Perignon. "Who wants a drink?" she announced. "We need to toast. We need to get the smell of failure out of this house." "That is mine, Viola," I said, speaking for the first time since they arrived. Mama Viola stopped and looked at me with mock surprise. "Oh, I didn't see you there sitting in the corner like a ghost. And it ain't yours anymore, honey. My son paid for this house. He paid for this wine. Community property laws, sweetheart. Or didn't you learn that in whatever little school you went to?" Ashley giggled. "Don't be mean, Mama V. Tasha probably doesn't understand how assets work. She has never had any." Malik walked over and took the bottle from his mother. "Don't waste your breath on her, Mama. She is leaving in 40 minutes. Her daddy is coming to pick her up." Ashley turned to me, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Oh, that is so embarrassing. Daddy has to come rescue you." "You are 32 years old, Tasha. It is pathetic. But hey, at least you don't have to worry about maintaining this big house anymore. It is a lot of work for someone who doesn't have a job." "I have a job, Ashley," I said calmly. "Oh, right," she rolled her eyes. "You consult. That is just a fancy word for unemployed wife with a rich husband. But you are not a wife anymore. So I guess you are just unemployed." Trey snickered. "Hey, maybe you can get a job at the mall. I heard they are hiring for the holidays." Malik popped the cork on the champagne, the sound echoing through the room. He poured glasses for everyone but me. To the future, he toasted, raising his glass high. To leveling up. To getting rid of the dead weight and finally living the life I deserve. To Malik, they all chorused, clinking their glasses. I watched them drink my champagne. I watched Ashley scuff her cheap boots on my $50,000 rug. I watched Mama Viola put her feet up on my coffee table, and I felt a cold, hard anger settle in my chest. They really thought this was their victory lap. They thought they had won the lottery. Malik turned to me, his eyes shining with malice. "You know, Tasha, I was going to let you keep the jewelry I bought you, but now that I think about it, I should probably keep it. Give it to someone who appreciates it. Someone who actually deserves to wear diamonds. He was talking about the engagement ring, the one he bought with the bonus check I secretly arranged for his company to give him 3 years ago. You can have the ring, Malik, I said, setting my wine glass down. It never fit right anyway. It was always a little small. His face darkened. You are always so ungrateful. That is why I am leaving you. Because I found someone who knows how to treat a king. Ashley perked up. Is she coming? Is Chloe coming? Malik smiled a different kind of smile, one full of lust and pride. Yeah, she is on her way. I wanted you all to meet her. She is a model. A real model, not like Tasha who just reads magazines. Chloe has over 50,000 followers on Instagram. She is young, she is beautiful, and she worships the ground I walk on. Mama Viola clapped her hands. Praise God. A woman with status. That is what you need, baby. Someone who looks good on your arm. Not someone who looks like she just rolled out of the library. So I thought. There is a replacement already. The ink isn't dry, and he is bringing his mistress into my home. The level of disrespect was breathtaking, but it was perfect. The more of them here, the better. I wanted every single one of them to witness what was about to happen. The front door opened again and a girl walked in who looked like she had been generated by a filter. She was young, maybe 22, wearing a dress that cost less than the napkin she was holding. She bounced into the room, her eyes locking onto Malik. Baby, she squealed, throwing her arms around his neck. Malik spun her around, laughing. Family, this is Chloe. This is the future Mrs. Malik Johnson. Chloe waved at everyone, flashing a ring on her finger. My eyes zeroed in on it. It wasn't a new ring. It was a vintage yellow diamond. It was the heirloom ring Mama Viola had shown me 5 years ago, the one she said was lost. The one she said she wished she could have given me, but it had been stolen. She had given it to him for her. That is a beautiful ring, Chloe, I said, my voice cutting through their celebration. Chloe looked at me confused. Oh, thanks. Malik's mom gave it to us. She said it has been in the family for generations, and she was saving it for a woman who was truly worthy. Mama Viola refused to look at me. She busied herself pouring more champagne. I see, I said. Truly worthy. Chloe looked at the boxes near the door, my 2 suitcases that Malik had thrown there earlier. Oh, are you the ex? She asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I am so sorry. This must be so hard for you, watching a man upgrade. But do not worry. I am sure you will find someone. There is someone for everyone, right? Even for, well, for everyone. She giggled, and Ashley joined in. I checked my watch again. 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes left. Malik walked over to me, Chloe hanging off his arm. Look at the time, Tasha. Your hour is almost up. If your daddy isn't here in 5 minutes, I am dragging you out by your hair. I want to have sex with my fiancé in my house, and you are killing the vibe. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my silk dress. You are right, Malik. The vibe is dead. But before I go, there is just one thing. What, he snapped. You might want to check the deed to this house. He laughed. I don't need to check anything. I pay the mortgage. I pay the bills. This is my house. You pay the utilities. Malik, I corrected him. You pay for the lights and the water, but you don't pay the mortgage. Because there is no mortgage. What are you talking about? You are crazy. The house was bought cash, Malik, 5 years ago, by the Elijah and Tasha Family Trust. You signed a tenancy at will agreement the day we moved in. Did you never read the documents my father gave you? Or were you too busy staring at yourself in the mirror? Malik's face faltered for a second, but Ashley stepped in. She thinks she can scare us with big words. Tenancy at will. Please, you are his wife. It is marital property. Not this house, I said, looking Ashley dead in the eye. This house is a premarital asset held in a trust. Malik is a guest. And his guest privileges just expired. Malik stepped closer, his fists clenched. I don't care what papers you have. Possession is 9/10 of the law. I am here. My family is here. My stuff is here. You are the one leaving. Just then, the low rumble of engines vibrated through the floorboards. It wasn't the sound of a taxi. It wasn't the sound of a single car. It sounded like a motorcade. Lights flashed through the front window blindingly bright. Blue and red lights mixed with the white beams of heavy SUVs. Malik ran to the window. "What the hell is that?" I picked up my glass of wine and finished the last drop. That I said, setting the glass down on the table Mama Viola had put her feet on. "That is my ride, and I think he brought some friends." Outside, the screech of tires on the pavement signaled the arrival. The heavy thud of car doors slamming followed. 1, 2, 4, 6 doors. Malik backed away from the window, his face pale. "There are cops, and who are those guys in the suits?" The front door didn't open. It was kicked open. But not by my father. By the head of his private security detail, a man named Marcus, who was 6'5" and built like a tank. Marcus stepped in, surveyed the room, and then stepped aside. And then Elijah walked in. My father didn't look like an old man coming to pick up his deadweight daughter. He was wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Malik's car. He walked with a cane not because he needed it, but because it had a heavy silver handle that looked like a lion's head, and he liked the sound it made on the floor. Click, click, click. Behind him walked 3 lawyers in gray suits holding thick binders, and behind them 2 uniformed police officers. The room went deathly silent. Ashley dropped her measuring tape. Mama Viola put the champagne bottle down so fast it clinked loudly against the table. Chloe tried to hide behind Malik, but Malik was too busy trying to shrink into the floor. Elijah stopped in the center of the room. He didn't look at Malik. He didn't look at the family. He looked straight at me. "Are you ready to go, Tasha?" he asked, his voice calm, deep, and terrifying. "I am, Daddy," I said. "But they seem to think this is their house." Elijah turned his head slowly like a predator spotting prey. He looked at Malik, who was trembling. "Is that so?" Elijah asked. Malik stammered. We are married. This is my home. I told you to come get her." Elijah laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You told me to come get my deadweight. So I did. But I think you are confused about who the deadweight is in this equation, son." He signaled to the lawyer on his right. "Mr. Henderson, please explain the situation to this young man." The lawyer stepped forward, opening a binder. "Mr. Johnson, according to the prenuptial agreement you signed 5 years ago, and the deed to this property, your right to reside in this domicile is contingent upon your marriage to Tasha. Since the divorce papers were signed approximately 1 hour ago, your tenancy is officially terminated. You are currently trespassing." Malik's eyes bulged. "That's a lie, I never signed that." "We have your signature right here," the lawyer said, holding up a document. "And we have the video of you signing it." Elijah tapped his cane on the floor. "You have 5 minutes, Malik. 5 minutes to take your trash, your mother, your brother, his loud wife, and your little girlfriend, and get off my property. Anything left here after 5 minutes belongs to the trust." Mama Viola screamed, "You can't do this. We are family." Elijah looked at her with cold eyes. "You are not family. You are parasites. And the host has finally taken the medicine. Get out." Ashley tried to grab the Persian rug. "I am taking this." Marcus, the security guard, stepped in front of her. "Touching nothing, ma'am. Leave. Now." The panic that ensued was chaotic and beautiful. They scrambled. Ashley was crying about her purse. Chloe ran out the door without even waiting for Malik. Trey tried to carry a box of liquor but dropped it, shattering bottles everywhere. Malik stood there paralyzed. But my company. My $10 million. Elijah paused at the door. "Oh yes. The company. We will be auditing that tomorrow. Since the seed capital was a loan from my firm, and you just violated the morality clause by moving a mistress in before the divorce was finalized, I am calling in the loan. Full repayment. Due immediately." Malik fell to his knees. I walked past him, my heels clicking on the floor, stepping over the spilled champagne. I didn't look down. I walked out the door to the waiting limousine, my father's hand on my back. Behind me, I heard Malik sobbing, but I didn't turn around. The dead weight was gone, and I had never felt lighter. Malik had been too busy looking at the photos of the infinity pool to read a single word. When my father handed him the pen, Malik had asked, "Where do I sign to get the keys?" My father had pointed to a line at the bottom of a document titled Tenancy at Will and Occupancy Agreement. It was a standard document for trust-held properties, essentially stating that Malik was a guest who could live there as long as he was married to me, the primary beneficiary. Malik had signed it with a flourish, barely glancing at the text. Then my father had handed him the utility transfer forms. "You can handle the light bill, right, son?" My father had asked, a test of character. "Of course, Pops," Malik had said, puffing out his chest. "I am the man of the house. I pay the bills." He had signed the utility forms with gravity, thinking they were the most important papers in the pile. He had walked out of that office thinking he owned a mansion. In reality, he had signed a contract to be a glorified caretaker who paid for the electricity. "You are confused, Malik," I said, crossing my legs. "Paying the light bill does not make you the owner. It makes you a tenant who is currently in arrears." "Shut up!" Mama Viola shouted from the dining room, where she was currently wrapping my silver candle holders in paper napkins to steal. "You are just jealous because my son is a mogul. He built this. He bought this. I remember when he told me he bought this house. He called me and said, 'Mama, I made it.' You don't get to take that away from him just because you are bitter." She marched into the living room, her handbag clinking with the sound of stolen silverware. She reached into her bosom and pulled out a folded piece of paper that looked like it had been torn from a spiral notebook. She slapped it down on the table next to the electric bill. "We are done playing games," she announced. "We tried to be nice. We tried to let you leave with dignity, but you want to sit here and talk about laws. Okay, let's talk law." She smoothed the paper out with her palm. It was handwritten in blue ballpoint pen, the handwriting jagged and aggressive. "Sign this," she ordered. I looked down at the paper. It was a crude contract written in what I assumed was Mama Viola's attempt at legalese. "I, Tasha, hereby agree that I am a bad wife and I don't want no money. I agree that Malik keeps the house, the cars, and the business. I agree that I will not ask for alimony because I am able-bodied and can work. If I sign this, the Johnson family agrees not to sue me for emotional distress and wasting Malik's prime years." I looked up at her, blinking. "Is this a joke?" "Does it look like a joke?" Viola hissed. "This is a binding agreement. You sign this and we let you walk out of here without pressing charges." Pressing charges for what? I asked, genuinely curious about the depths of their insanity. "For fraud," Malik interjected, stepping up beside his mother. "For pretending to be a supportive wife while dragging me down. For emotional damages. For trespassing. If you sign that waiver, Tasha, I will call off the police. I will tell them it was a misunderstanding. But if you don't sign it right now, when those officers walk through that door, I am going to have you arrested for harassment and disturbing the peace." Ashley chimed in from the hallway, where she was currently using a butter knife to try and pry a brass sconce off the wall. "And we will sue you for legal fees too. My cousin is a paralegal. He said we have a strong case. You have been squatting here emotionally for years. This was their master plan. Intimidation by stupidity. They thought they could bully me into signing away my rights with a piece of notebook paper and a threat of police intervention. They didn't know that my prenup was 60 pages long and drafted by the same firm that handled divorces for senators. They didn't know that the business Malik wanted to keep was legally a subsidiary of my personal investment portfolio." I picked up the paper. It felt flimsy and cheap between my fingers. "You want me to sign this?" I asked. "Yes," Mama Viola said, handing me the Mont Blanc pen Malik had used to sign the divorce papers. "Sign it. Admit you are nothing. Admit my son is the king, and then get out of my house." I looked at the pen, I looked at the paper, and then I looked at Malik. He was practically vibrating with adrenaline, his eyes wide and manic. He truly believed this was his moment. He believed he had won. I am not signing this, Viola, I said, dropping the paper back onto the table. And I am not leaving, because you are missing a very important piece of information. What information? Malik spat. The trust fund deed, I said. They all stared at me blankly. The what? Trey asked, lowering his bottle of scotch. The deed, Malik, I said, speaking slowly as if to a child. The piece of paper that actually says who owns the house. It is not on the electric bill. It is filed with the county. And it lists the owner as the Elijah and Tasha Family Preservation Trust. Do you know who the trustee is? Malik rolled his eyes. You are making words up. Trust fund. You don't have a trust fund. You work at a nonprofit, Tasha. You make $50,000 a year. I saw your tax returns. You saw the tax returns for my salary, I corrected him. You never saw the K-1s for the trust distributions, because those go directly to my father's accountants. You never asked where the down payment came from. You never asked how we qualified for a $5 million home with your credit score of 600 and my nonprofit salary. You just assumed you were magic. I am magic, Malik shouted, slamming his fist into his palm. I am a tech CEO. My company is worth $10 million. Your company. I laughed, a cold, sharp sound. Your company was seeded with venture capital from E&T Ventures. E&T Malik, Elijah and Tasha. We funded you. We own 60% of your stock. We own the IP. We own the building you rent. You don't even own the chair you sit in at work. Liar, Ashley screamed. She is lying, Malik. She is just trying to scare us. She is jealous because you have Chloe now. Chloe, who had been relatively quiet, looked up from her phone. Wait, he doesn't own the company. Shut up, Chloe, Malik snapped. Of course I own it. She is delusional. She is having a mental breakdown. This is sad. This is really sad, Tasha. Creating a fantasy world to cope with your failure. He grabbed the waiver and shoved it against my chest. Sign the paper. Last chance. I pushed his hand away. No. Fine, Malik yelled. Have it your way. Go to jail. Be a felon. See if I care. He walked to the window and looked out. The flashing blue lights were turning the corner at the end of the long driveway. Here they come, he shouted triumphantly. The police are here. You are done, Tasha. You are finished. Ashley ran to the window. Yes, lock her up. Officer, she is dangerous. She threatened us. Mama Viola started gathering her stolen goods into a pile, preparing to look like a victim. Just tell them she attacked you, Malik. Tell them she wouldn't let us leave. The sirens wailed loud and piercing, cutting through the night air. The blue and red lights washed over the living room, illuminating the destruction they had caused. The spilled champagne, the tagged furniture, the defaced art. But then, underneath the high-pitched shriek of the sirens, another sound emerged. It was a low, guttural rumble, a vibration that I felt in my teeth before I heard it with my ears. It sounded like thunder rolling across the pavement. Malik stopped celebrating. He tilted his head. What is that noise? The rumble grew louder, drowning out the sirens. It was the sound of heavy engines, 8-cylinder engines, a lot of them. Headlights swept across the front lawn, but they weren't the searchlights of a police cruiser. They were brighter, higher. They were the LED beams of heavy-duty SUVs. One black Cadillac Escalade pulled into the driveway, blocking the path of the police car. Then another, then a third, then a fourth. They moved with military precision, forming a wall of black steel between the street and the house. Ashley backed away from the window. Malik, those aren't cops. Who is that? Malik looked pale. I don't know. The doors of the SUVs opened in unison. The sound was heavy and expensive. Thud, thud, thud. Men in dark suits stepped out. They weren't wearing police uniforms. They were wearing earpieces. They moved with a fluidity that was terrifying. And then from the second vehicle, a man stepped out. He didn't rush. He adjusted his cufflinks. He buttoned his jacket. He grabbed a silver-handled cane from the back seat. Malik gasped. It is him. Who? Mama Viola asked, clutching her chest. Your father, Malik whispered. The police officer who had just pulled up stepped out of his cruiser, hand on his holster, looking confused. He walked toward the wall of escalades. One of the men in suits intercepted him, flashing a badge that wasn't a police badge. It was a private security credential backed by enough political influence to make a beat cop hesitate. The officer stopped. He nodded. He stepped back. My father walked up the front steps. He didn't ring the bell. He didn't knock. He simply nodded to the man beside him, a giant named Marcus. Marcus raised a heavy boot and kicked the front door. The lock splintered with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. The door swung open, banging against the wall. The wind from outside rushed into the room, carrying the scent of rain and expensive cologne. My father stood in the doorway, framed by the flashing lights of the police cars he had just neutralized. He looked at the chaos in the room. He looked at the sticky notes. He looked at the spilled wine. And then he looked at Malik. Malik, my father said, his voice a low rumble that matched the engines outside. I believe our contract has expired. The sirens cut out abruptly, replaced by the low, synchronized hum of idling engines that vibrated deep in the chest. Malik stood on the front porch, his arms spread wide in a gesture of welcome that looked more like a desperate plea for validation. He was beaming at the flashing lights, convinced that his salvation had arrived in the form of the Atlanta Police Department. He turned back to look at me through the open doorway, his face twisted in a sneer of absolute victory. Watch this, Tasha, he shouted over the noise. Watch how a real homeowner handles business. You wanted a show. Well, here is the grand finale. He jogged down the steps, his Italian loafers slipping slightly on the wet pavement, eager to greet the officer stepping out of the patrol car. Officer over here, Malik yelled, waving his hand frantically. The trespasser is inside. She is hostile. She has threatened my family and destroyed my property. I want her removed immediately. The officer, a seasoned sergeant with a tired face and a name tag that read, Miller, stepped out of his cruiser. He adjusted his belt, his hand resting instinctively near his holster, his eyes scanning the scene with the weary caution of a man who had seen too many domestic disputes turn violent. He started walking toward Malik, his expression neutral, ready to take a statement. But then Officer Miller stopped. He stopped dead in his tracks, his boots skidding slightly on the asphalt. His eyes drifted past Malik, past the front porch, and locked onto the wall of black steel that had just formed a blockade across the entire width of the driveway. 4 Cadillac Escalades, their black paint absorbing the flashing blue lights of the police cruiser, sat idling in a perfect phalanx. They were not police vehicles. They were darker, heavier, and radiated a kind of menace that government-issued cars simply could not replicate. They were the kind of vehicles that carried heads of state or people who owned heads of state. Malik turned around, confused by the officer's hesitation. What is the problem, officer? Arrest her. Why are you staring at the cars? Officer Miller didn't answer. He took a step back, his hand moving away from his belt and holding up a palm in a gesture of deference. He knew that grill. He knew those tinted windows. In Atlanta, there are certain vehicles you do not ticket, and certain people you do not interrupt. The doors of the SUVs opened in unison, a choreographed movement of military precision. The sound of heavy latches clicking open echoed through the humid night air. From the lead vehicle and the rear guard, 6 men stepped out. They were giants, dressed in charcoal suits that strained across shoulders, built for violence. They wore earpieces and moved with a fluid, lethal grace, scanning the perimeter, the roofline, and the police officer. Officer Miller actually holstered his thumb, taking another step back toward his cruiser. He recognized the security detail. This wasn't just private security. This was the Praetorian Guard of Buckhead Finance. From the second vehicle, a driver stepped out and walked around to the rear passenger door. He opened it with a white-gloved hand. A cane emerged first. It was made of polished ebony, topped with a heavy silver handle carved into the shape of a roaring lion. The cane planted firmly on the asphalt with a sharp click. Then a shoe appeared. A black Oxford polished to a mirror shine, handmade, the kind of shoe that cost more than the average mortgage payment. Elijah Vance stepped out into the night. My father did not look like the old frail man Malik had described to his friends. He looked like a titan carved from granite. At 65, he stood 6'2", his posture impeccable, his presence consuming all the oxygen in the driveway. He wore a three-piece suit that fit him like a second skin, the fabric dark and rich. He didn't look at the police officer. He didn't look at the house. He looked straight ahead, his face a mask of terrifying calm. Behind him, 4 men and women in sharp gray suits exited the third vehicle. They carried thick leather briefcases and tablets. They were the legal team, the assassins who used paper instead of bullets. Malik's mouth fell open. He looked from the police officer, who was now standing at attention, to the wall of security, and finally to my father. The arrogance drained out of his face like water from a cracked glass, replaced by a dawning icy horror. "Mr. Vance," Officer Miller said, his voice respectful and slightly nervous. "I didn't know you were involved in this call, sir. We received a report of a disturbance." My father paused, adjusting his cufflinks. "There is no disturbance, Sergeant. Just a tenant dispute. My legal team is handling the eviction process as we speak. You can stand down." The officer nodded immediately. "Of course, sir. If you have security handled, we will just file a report and clear the scene." Malik sputtered, his brain unable to process what was happening. "Wait. No. Officer, do not leave. That is her father. He is threatening me. This is my house. He is the intruder. You have to arrest them." Officer Miller looked at Malik with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Son, do you know who that is? That is Elijah Vance. If he says he is handling it, he is handling it. I suggest you listen to him." The officer got back in his car and turned off his lights. The sudden darkness left Malik exposed in the beams of the Escalade's headlights, looking small and pathetic. My father walked past Malik as if he were a landscaping ornament. He didn't even blink. He didn't acknowledge the shouting man who had just demanded his arrest. He simply walked up the front steps, the silver tip of his cane clicking rhythmically against the stone. Click, click, click. Malik scrambled after him, trying to block the doorway. "You can't go in there. That is my private property. I have rights." Marcus, the head of security, stepped in front of Malik. Marcus was a mountain of a man, his face a roadmap of scars from a past life he didn't talk about. He didn't touch Malik. He just occupied the space where Malik wanted to be, forcing my ex-husband to bounce off his chest like a rubber ball. "Excuse me, sir." Marcus rumbled, his voice like grinding gravel. "Mr. Vance has an appointment." My father stepped over the threshold and into the foyer. The chaos inside froze instantly. It was like someone had hit the pause button on a movie. Mama Viola was standing by the dining table, a silver candlestick halfway into her oversized purse. Her eyes bulged as she saw the figure in the doorway. She dropped the candlestick. It hit the floor with a loud clang that echoed in the silence. Ashley was on a stepladder trying to pry a crystal sconce off the wall with a butter knife. She froze, her arm extended, looking down at my father with wide, terrified eyes. Trey, who had been disconnecting the television, stood up so fast he nearly tipped the screen over. He wiped his hands on his jeans, looking for a back exit that didn't exist. Chloe, the mistress with the stolen ring, shrank back against the wall, trying to make herself invisible behind a potted plant. My father stood in the center of the foyer, his presence filling the vaulted space. He took a slow breath, looking around at the destruction. He looked at the spilled champagne soaking into the hardwood. He looked at the neon sticky notes plastering my furniture. He looked at the Basquiat with the pink tag on it. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He turned his head slowly and looked at me. I was still sitting on the sofa, my hands folded in my lap, watching the scene unfold with the same cold detachment I had maintained for the last hour. My father walked toward me. The crowd of looters parted for him like the Red Sea. He ignored Mama Viola, who was trembling. He ignored Ashley, who was climbing down from the ladder with shaking legs. He walked straight to me. He stopped in front of the sofa and looked down at me. His eyes, usually hard as flint, softened just a fraction. He saw the fatigue in my posture. He saw the empty wine glass. He saw the sheer exhaustion of 5 years of pretending to be less than I was, just to protect a fragile man's ego. "Tasha," he said, his voice deep and resonant, cutting through the silence. I looked up at him. "Hello, Daddy." He extended a hand. I took it, and he helped me stand. His grip was warm and solid, the first real support I had felt in what seemed like a lifetime. He looked me over, checking for injuries, checking for cracks in my armor. Finding none, he nodded once, a sharp approving jerk of his chin. "Have you finished your business here?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried the weight of everything that had led to this moment. It wasn't just about the divorce papers. It was about the emotional labor. It was about the dimming of my own light. It was about the charity work I had done trying to build a man who was determined to remain a boy. I looked at Malik, who was standing in the doorway, panting, his face a mask of confusion and fear. I looked at his mother, the woman who had called me barren and useless. I looked at his brother and sister-in-law, the parasites who had feasted on my generosity while mocking me behind my back. And I looked at Chloe, the girl wearing my stolen ring, terrified and realizing she had boarded a sinking ship. I took a deep breath, inhaling the expensive cologne of my father and the scent of rain from the open door. I felt the last tether snap. The guilt was gone. The obligation was gone. The pity was gone. "Yes, Daddy," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I am finished." My father nodded. "Good." I smoothed my dress and picked up my clutch. I walked past the lawyers, who were already opening their briefcases on the dining table, spreading out documents that would dismantle Malik's life. I walked past Marcus, who gave me a respectful nod. I stopped in front of Malik. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, searching for the doormat he had married. He was looking for the woman who would fix this, who would tell her father it was all a misunderstanding, who would write a check to make the scary men go away. "Tasha," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Tasha, baby, tell him. Tell him this is our house. Tell him to stop." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I felt absolutely nothing. He was a stranger, a bad investment I had finally written off. I turned to my father. "Daddy," I said, gesturing to the room full of people who had tried to break me. "Please take out the trash for me." My father smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile that promised nothing but scorched earth. "Consider it done, sweetheart," he said. He snapped his fingers. The lawyers stepped forward. The security team moved in, and the room erupted into chaos. As I walked out the front door, the first raindrops began to fall, washing the dust from the driveway. I stepped into the back of the lead Escalade, the leather seat cool and welcoming. The door closed with a solid thud, sealing out the noise of Malik's screaming. I watched through the tinted glass as Marcus grabbed Malik by the collar of his cheap suit. The engine purred to life. I didn't look back. The Queen had left the building and the executioners had just clocked in. The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating, broken only by the sound of rain beginning to pelt against the windows outside. My father snapped his fingers and the lead lawyer, Mr. Henderson, stepped forward. He didn't look like a man who shouted. He looked like a man who whispered sentences that destroyed lives. He placed a heavy leather briefcase onto the dining table right on top of a water ring left by Trey's scotch glass. The sound of the latch clicking open was louder than a gunshot. Henderson pulled out a thick stack of documents bound in blue legal covers. He didn't hand them to Malik. He didn't hand them to me. He laid them out on the table, fanning them like a winning poker hand. "Mr. Johnson," Henderson began, his voice smooth and devoid of any warmth. "It appears there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding the ownership status of this property. You seem to be under the impression that this residence is a marital asset subject to equitable distribution." Malik puffed his chest out, trying to regain the height he had lost when my father walked in. "It is a marital asset," he spat, pointing a shaking finger at the floor. "We lived here for 5 years. I paid the bills. I did the landscaping. It is my house. I put sweat equity into this place. Henderson didn't even blink. He simply tapped the top document with a manicured fingernail. Sweat equity is a concept for homeowners, Mr. Johnson. You are not a homeowner. You are and have always been a guest. Ashley snorted from the corner where she was still clutching her tape measure. That is ridiculous, she said, her voice shrill. He is her husband. In Georgia, that means 50-50. I am a real estate agent. I know the law. You can't just kick a spouse out of the marital home. Henderson turned his cold gaze toward Ashley. Ah, yes, the sister-in-law with the real estate aspirations. Perhaps you would be so kind as to read the deed. He slid the document toward her. Ashley hesitated. She looked at Malik, who gave her a nod of encouragement. Go ahead, Ash. Read it. Tell them what it says. Tell them it says Malik Johnson right there at the top. Ashley walked over to the table. She picked up the document. Her eyes scanned the top of the page. I watched her face closely. I wanted to see the exact moment her dreams of a 3% commission evaporated. She read the header. Her brow furrowed. She read the first paragraph. Her lips parted slightly. She flipped to the second page. Her hand started to shake. What is it, babe? Trey asked, stepping closer to her. What does it say? Ashley looked up, her face pale under her layers of bronzer. She looked at Malik with wide, fearful eyes. Malik, she whispered. Your name isn't on the deed. Malik laughed, a nervous, jittery sound. Don't be stupid. Of course it is. Look closer. It is probably under the mortgage company or something. Ashley shook her head slowly. No, Malik. There is no mortgage company. The grantee is listed as the Elijah and Tasha Family Preservation Trust. So what? Malik shouted. That is just legal jargon. It means we own it through a trust. That is what rich people do, right, Elijah? We put it in a trust to save on taxes. That is our trust. Henderson cleared his throat. Correction. That is Ms. Vance's trust. Established 10 years before she met you. You are not a beneficiary. You are not a trustee. You are not even a contingent remainder man. He pulled another document from the pile. This, however, is the document you signed 5 years ago. Do you recognize your signature, Mr. Johnson? Malik squinted at the paper. It was the tenancy at will agreement, the one he had signed without reading because he was too busy fantasizing about pool parties. Ashley snatched the paper from Henderson's hand. She read it frantically, her eyes darting back and forth. Tenancy at will, she read aloud, her voice trembling. The occupant, Malik Johnson, acknowledges that his residence is granted solely at the discretion of the trust and is contingent upon his legal marriage to the primary beneficiary, Tasha Vance. Upon dissolution of said marriage, or upon written notice from the trustee, the tenancy is immediately revoked. She dropped the paper, as if it were burning her skin. She looked at Malik with a mixture of horror and disgust. You signed a rental agreement, she screeched. You told me you bought this house. You told me you put down 20%. You told me we were sitting on $5 million of equity. I didn't sign a rental agreement, Malik stammered, looking frantically between Ashley and the lawyer. I signed the closing papers. I remember. I signed a stack of papers this high. You signed acknowledgments, Henderson corrected. You signed waivers. You signed non-disclosure agreements regarding the security system. But you never signed a deed. You never signed a mortgage. You were never the owner. You were essentially a long-term house sitter with benefits. Mama Viola let out a wail, clutching her chest. This is a trick. This is the devil's work. You tricked my boy. You used big words and fancy lawyers to steal his birthright. Nobody stole anything, Madam Henderson said coolly. Your son simply assumed he was entitled to things he did not earn. Malik wasn't ready to give up. He was cornered, and like a rat he was ready to bite. This is bullshit, he screamed, his face turning a dark shade of plum. I paid the bills. I have the receipts. I paid Georgia Power. I paid Atlanta Water. I paid for the internet. He grabbed the utility bill from the coffee table where he had slammed it earlier and thrust it at Henderson. Look at this. Look at the name. Malik Johnson. That establishes residency. That establishes ownership rights. I paid thousands of dollars into this house. You can't just erase that. Henderson looked at the crumpled bill with distaste. He didn't take it, he just sighed. Mr. Johnson, in a standard landlord-tenant relationship, the tenant is often responsible for utilities. The fact that you paid for the electricity you consumed does not give you equity in the structure. It simply means you paid for the privilege of having the lights on while you watch TV on a sofa you didn't buy. But it proves I lived here, Malik yelled, his voice cracking. We are not disputing that you lived here, Henderson said. We are disputing your right to stay here now that your lease is up. And regarding those payments you made. Henderson pulled a calculator from his pocket. We have audited the household accounts. The trust deposited a monthly allowance into a joint checking account to cover household expenses. That allowance was $15,000 a month. The total cost of utilities and upkeep averaged $4,000. He looked over his glasses at Malik. So essentially, Mr. Johnson, you were paying the electric bill with your wife's money, and then pocketing the difference. You weren't supporting this household. The household was supporting you. And we classified that $11,000 surplus as a management fee, or, if you prefer, nominal rent. Ashley let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Nominal rent, she repeated. Nominal rent. She turned on Malik, her face twisting into a mask of fury. You broke-ass liar. You told me you were paying the mortgage. You told me the reason you couldn't invest in my condo project was because all your cash was tied up in this house. Malik backed away from her. Ashley, chill. They are lying. They are trying to confuse us. They aren't lying, Malik Ashley screamed. She grabbed the file folder and threw it at him. The papers scattered across the floor like confetti. Look at the stamps. Look at the seals. These are registered documents. You don't own this house. You don't own the land. You don't own the pool. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on the lamp she had tagged with a sticky note earlier. She ripped the note off and crumbled it up. You don't own anything, she whispered, the realization crashing down on her. You don't even own the light bulbs. That was the moment the reality hit. The phrase hung in the air. You don't even own the light bulbs. It was the ultimate castration. Malik wasn't a king. He wasn't even a peasant. He was a parasite who had convinced himself he was the host. Malik stood there surrounded by the scattered papers, shaking his head. No. No. This isn't right. I am the man of this house. Tasha, tell them. Tell them I took care of things. Tell them I fixed the garbage disposal that one time. I looked at him from the sofa. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with the blank expression one reserves for a stranger on the subway. You called a plumber, Malik, I said softly. And you paid him with the credit card my father gave you for emergencies. Malik flinched as if I had slapped him. Henderson checked his watch. The hour is up, Mr. Johnson. The eviction notice is effective immediately. You are now trespassing on private property. And since you have already called the police to report a trespasser, I believe the officers outside are ready to make an arrest if you do not vacate the premises in the next 5 minutes. Mama Viola stood up trembling. She looked at the silver candlestick she had dropped earlier. She bent down to pick it up, her hand shaking. I am taking this, she muttered. This is compensation. For my suffering. For the years I spent being nice to that cold woman. Marcus, the security guard, took one heavy step forward. His shadow fell over Mama Viola. Put it down, ma'am, Marcus rumbled. Mama Viola looked at Marcus, then at the candlestick, then at my father. Elijah, please. We go way back. You came to my husband's funeral. You can't let them treat us like criminals. My father looked at her, his face hard as stone. I came to your husband's funeral out of respect for a hard-working man, Elijah said. A man who knew the value of earning his way. If he could see what you and your sons have become, he would be ashamed. You are not taking the silver viola. You are taking your leave. And you are doing it now. Ashley grabbed Trey by the arm. Let's go, she hissed. We need to leave before they start asking about the car. Trey looked confused. The car? What about the car? Ashley's eyes widened. If he doesn't own the house Trey, he probably doesn't own the G-Wagon either. We need to get the hell out of here before they take the keys. They turned to run toward the door, but Henderson cleared his throat again. A sound that stopped them in their tracks. Actually, he said, opening a second file folder. Since you mentioned the vehicles, we should probably discuss the transportation situation. Malik looked at the driveway where his matte black G-Wagon was parked next to my father's fleet. Don't you touch my truck, he growled. That is in my name. I have the title. Henderson smiled. A thin, predatory smile. You have a title with a lien holder, Mr. Johnson. And the lien holder is E&T Automotive Leasing, a subsidiary of the trust. And according to the terms of the lease default on the character clause, which includes adultery and public defamation of the primary shareholder, triggers an immediate repossession clause. Henderson signaled to one of the security guards. Tow it! Malik screamed, a sound of pure primal loss. No, you can't. That is my image. That is who I am. Without the truck, without the house, without the money, Malik was nothing. He was a paper tiger dissolving in the rain. Ashley didn't wait to hear anymore. She ran out the front door, pulling Trey behind her. She didn't head for the G-Wagon. She headed for her own beat-up sedan parked on the street, realizing that the proximity to Malik was now a liability, not an asset. Chloe, the mistress, who had been silent this entire time watching her future implode, slowly took the yellow diamond ring off her finger. She placed it gently on the side table next to my empty wine glass. I think I will just Uber, she whispered. She walked past Malik without looking at him. She walked past Mama Viola, who was sobbing into a napkin. She walked out the door and into the night, leaving the man she had worshipped 5 minutes ago, standing alone in the wreckage of his own ego. Malik looked around the room. He looked at me. He looked at my father. He looked at the police officers who were now standing in the doorway waiting for the signal. This isn't fair, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. I was a good husband. I tried. You tried to spend my money, I corrected him, standing up finally. And you succeeded for a while. But the Bank of Tasha is closed, Malik, permanently. I nodded to Marcus. Get him out, I said. And as Marcus reached for Malik's collar, I finally turned away. I walked toward the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water from the tap. It tasted clean. It tasted like ownership. It tasted like victory. The light bulbs above my head flickered once and then shined bright and steady. They were my light bulbs, and they were finally shining on the truth. Henderson cleared his throat, a sound that cut through the humidity of the open doorway like a gavel striking a desk. He didn't look at Ashley running toward her sedan or Trey stumbling after her. He looked directly at Malik, who was clutching his car keys like they were the last lifeline on a sinking ship. Actually, Mr. Johnson, Henderson said, opening a second, thinner file folder. Since you mentioned the vehicle, we should probably discuss the transportation situation. I believe you are under the impression that the matte black G-Wagon currently blocking the driveway is your personal property. Malik spun around, his eyes wild. Don't you dare. Do not touch my truck. That is in my name. I have the title. I have the registration in the glove box. That is a $200,000 vehicle, and I paid the down payment with my own bonus check. Henderson smiled. It was a thin, predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. You have a title with a lien holder, Mr. Johnson, and the lien holder is E&T Automotive Leasing, a subsidiary of the trust, and according to the terms of the lease default on the character clause, which includes adultery and public defamation of the primary shareholder, triggers an immediate repossession clause. Malik took a step back, shaking his head. What character clause? That is a car loan, not a church membership. It is a specialized high-asset lease, Henderson explained calmly, designed for family members of the trust. It offers a 0% interest rate as long as the lessee remains in good standing with the family. However, your standing has just been revoked. Henderson signaled to one of the security guards, a man with a thick neck and a clipboard who had been waiting by the lead escalade. "Tow it," Henderson said. No, Malik screamed, a sound of pure primal loss that echoed off the stone facade of the house. "You can't. That is my image. That is who I am." Without the truck, without the house, Malik was nothing. He was a paper tiger dissolving in the rain. He lunged toward the driveway, but Marcus stepped in his path. Marcus didn't even raise his hands. He just stood there, a wall of muscle and indifference. Malik bounced off him and stumbled back, panting. "We aren't finished," Henderson said, his voice hardening. "The vehicle is the least of your concerns. We need to discuss the matter of Apex Solutions." Malik froze. He looked at Henderson, then at me, then at my father. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. "My company," he whispered. "You can't touch my company. I built that. I wrote the code. I hired the team. That is my intellectual property. Your intellectual property belongs to the entity that funded its creation." Henderson corrected him. "You seem to have forgotten where your seed capital came from. 2 years ago, you received a Series A injection of $10 million. You told everyone you crushed a pitch meeting with a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley." "I did," Malik insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. "They loved my vision." "You pitched to a board of directors comprised of Elijah Vance and his estate planners," Henderson said. "The firm E&T Ventures is a private equity arm of the Vance family portfolio. We funded you, Malik, not because your vision was revolutionary, but because Tasha asked her father to give her husband a chance to feel important." I watched Malik's face crumble. The myth of the self-made man was evaporating. He wasn't a genius. He was a charity case. "And here is the problem," Henderson continued, flipping a page in the file. "That $10 million was structured as a spousal bridge loan. As long as you remained married to Tasha, the loan carried an interest rate of 1% annually with no repayment schedule. It was essentially free money to let you play CEO." Malik's breathing was shallow and fast. "So what? So I owe you some interest. Take it out of the profits." "There are no profits," Mr. Johnson, Henderson said dryly. "We have audited the books. You have been burning cash on expenses that have nothing to do with software development, first-class travel, dinners, jewelry, and a luxury apartment rental in Buckhead for a Miss Chloe Davis." Chloe, who had been trying to blend into the wallpaper, gasped. Malik winced. "That is embezzlement, Malik," my father spoke up for the first time since entering the house. "Using company funds for personal affairs is a crime. But I am not going to send you to jail for that. Not yet. I am simply activating the divorce clause in the loan agreement." Henderson tapped the document. "Upon the filing of divorce papers, the loan terms revert immediately to standard high-risk commercial rates, retroactive to the date of origination. The rate is now 18% compounded monthly, and the entire principal balance plus interest and penalties is due immediately upon the termination of the marriage." Malik stared at him blankly. "Due immediately. Accelerated repayment." Henderson confirmed. "You owe the principal of $10 million minus the remaining cash on hand, which we have already frozen, plus the retroactive interest, plus the penalties for the misuse of funds, plus the fair market value of the G-Wagon you just defaulted on." Henderson pulled a calculator from his pocket, though I knew he had already done the math. He punched in a few numbers, the clicking sound loud in the silent room. "The total amount due is $5,400,000, Henderson announced. "And you have 24 hours to wire the funds to the trust account. If the funds are not received by close of business tomorrow, we will move to seize all remaining personal assets, garnish your future wages, and file criminal charges for the misappropriation of the initial investment. $5.4 million. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. It was a death sentence. Malik didn't have $5 million. He didn't have $5,000. He had a maxed-out credit card and a wardrobe full of suits he couldn't afford to dry clean. Malik's knees gave out. He actually fell. He slumped onto the floor, sitting in a puddle of spilled champagne, looking up at Henderson with the eyes of a man who had just watched his executioner sharpen the axe. "I don't have it," he whispered. "I don't have it." "We know," Henderson said, closing the file with a snap. "That is why we are taking everything else." Chloe, the mistress who had been silent this entire time, watching her future implode, slowly peeled herself away from the wall. She looked at Malik sitting on the floor crying. She looked at the puddle of cheap alcohol soaking into his pants. She looked at the reality of a man with $5 million in debt and no car. She looked down at her hand. The yellow diamond ring sparkled under the chandelier lights. It was the only thing of value Malik had given her, and even that was stolen. I watched her face change. The adoration was gone. The influencer smile was gone. In its place was the cold calculation of a survivor. She realized she had bet on the wrong horse and the race was over. She slowly slid the ring off her finger. "Chloe," Malik croaked, reaching a hand out to her. "Chloe, baby, wait. We can fix this." Chloe didn't look at him. She looked at me. There was fear in her eyes, but also a strange sort of respect. She walked over to the side table where I had set my empty wine glass. She placed the ring gently next to the glass. It made a soft clinking sound. "I think I will just Uber," she whispered. She didn't wait for a response. She didn't say goodbye to Mama Viola, who was sobbing into a napkin in the corner. She didn't try to help Malik up. She turned on her heel, her white dress swishing around her legs, and walked toward the open door. She stepped out into the rain without looking back, leaving the man she had worshipped 5 minutes ago, standing alone in the wreckage of his own ego. Malik watched her go. He looked at the empty doorway. He looked at the ring on the table. He looked at me standing next to my father, untouchable and serene. "This isn't fair," he whispered, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat and the rain blowing in. "I was a good husband. I tried." "You tried to spend my money," I corrected him, standing up finally. "And you succeeded for a while. But the Bank of Tasha is closed, Malik. Permanently." I nodded to Marcus. "Get him out," I said. And as Marcus reached for Malik's collar, lifting him off the floor like a rag doll, I finally turned away. I walked toward the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water from the tap. It tasted clean. It tasted like ownership. It tasted like victory. The light bulbs above my head flickered once and then shined bright and steady. They were my light bulbs, and they were finally shining on the truth. The G-Wagon was being hooked up to a tow truck outside. The company was gone. The girl was gone. And in 24 hours, Malik would be nothing more than a cautionary tale in a cheap suit. I took a sip of water and smiled. The deadweight was gone. Officer Miller looked from the eviction notice in his hand to Malik and then back to the legal document. The sergeant's face hardened, shifting from the confusion of a responder to the resolve of an enforcer. He stepped past my father, his boots heavy on the hardwood, and stopped inches from Malik. The dynamic in the room had flipped so violently, it was almost enough to give you whiplash. Malik was still pointing at me, his finger trembling, his mouth open in a silent scream of entitlement, waiting for the handcuffs to click around my wrists. But Officer Miller didn't look at me. He looked at the man who had wasted his time. "Sir," the officer said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the sound of absolute authority, "I need you to lower your hand. You are currently trespassing on private property. The owner of this residence has requested your removal. You have exactly 5 minutes to gather your personal effects and vacate the premises. If you are still inside this house at the end of that 5 minutes, you will be arrested for criminal trespass." Malik blinked, his brain misfiring. "What? No. You are confused. I called you. I am the victim. She is the one refusing to leave." Officer Miller tapped the paper Henderson had given him. According to this deed and the trust documents verified by Mr. Vance's counsel, you are a guest whose invitation has been revoked. The law is clear, Mr. Johnson. You don't own this property. You don't have a lease. You are leaving. Now. Malik looked at me, his eyes wide and wet, pleading for me to stop the madness he had invited into our lives. But I just checked my watch. 4 minutes and 30 seconds, Malik. I said, my voice cool and detached. I wouldn't waste time staring at me. The clock is ticking. Panic, raw and ugly, finally set in. It rippled through the room like a shockwave. Ashley let out a strangled yelp and scrambled toward the guest room where she had dumped her purse. Trey dropped the Xbox he was trying to reconnect, the plastic casing cracking against the floor. Mama Viola stood up so fast her knees popped, her eyes darting around the room assessing what she could salvage from the wreckage of her son's kingdom. "We need bags!" Mama Viola shouted, her voice shrill. "We need suitcases. Where are the suitcases?" "You don't get suitcases," Henderson said from the doorway, checking his own expensive watch. "The luggage belongs to the house. You leave with what you carried in on your backs. Anything else stays." This triggered a frenzy. It was like watching rats on a sinking ship scurrying over each other to find high ground. Ashley was running in circles, grabbing random items, a throw pillow, a candle, a remote control, before realizing she had nowhere to put them, and dropping them back on the floor. Trey was trying to stuff bottles of liquor into his pockets, the glass clinking loudly, his pants sagging under the weight of stolen scotch. Mama Viola, however, had a specific target. She wasn't interested in throw pillows. Her eyes were locked on the coat closet near the entryway. I knew exactly what was in there. It was where I kept my overflow collection. The seasonal bags. The pieces I didn't keep in the master suite vault. Specifically, she was looking at a shelf that held a pristine white Himalaya Birkin bag. It was one of the most valuable items in the house, a bag I had waited 3 years on a list to acquire. She lunged for the closet door, her fingers clawing at the handle. She threw it open and grabbed the bag, clutching it to her chest like a life preserver. "That is mine," she screamed, clutching the white crocodile leather. "Malik bought this for me. It was a Mother's Day gift." It was a lie so bold it was almost impressive. Malik couldn't afford the dust bag for a Birkin, let alone the bag itself. Marcus, the head of security, moved with deceptive speed for a man of his size. He stepped into the hallway, blocking Viola's path to the door. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. He just stood there, a wall of muscle in a bespoke suit. "Put the bag down, ma'am," Marcus rumbled. "No," Viola shrieked, backing away, hugging the bag tighter. "It is mine. You can't take my things. This is elder abuse. I am calling the news." "You are stealing," Marcus corrected her. "That bag is registered to Tasha Vance. It has a microchip. If you walk out that door with it, the police officer standing right behind me will add grand larceny to the trespassing charge. Do you want to go to jail tonight, ma'am?" Viola looked at the police officer who was watching her with his hand resting on his handcuffs. She looked at the bag. She looked at Malik, who was uselessly arguing with the lawyer about his rights. She let out a sound of pure frustration, a guttural growl, and threw the bag onto the floor. It landed with a soft thud, unharmed. "I hope you rot," she spat at me. "I hope you rot in this big empty house with your money. You are a cold, heartless witch." I picked up the bag and dusted it off, checking for scratches. "I am not heartless, Viola," I said calmly. "I just don't like thieves." 3 minutes remaining. While Viola was losing her battle for the Birkin, Ashley was having a meltdown of her own in the living room. She had realized she couldn't take the furniture, so she was trying to save face by gathering her own belongings. She had a bag of her own, a bright orange tote that looked suspiciously like a Hermes Birkin. She had been parading it around earlier, claiming Malik had bought it for her as a thank you for being his real estate agent. She was trying to stuff a heavy crystal vase into the bag. It was a vase she had tagged with a sticky note earlier. She was shoving it down, forcing it past the zipper, her face red with exertion. "That is my vase, Ashley," I called out from the hallway. "It is a gift," she screamed, still pushing. "Malik said I could have it." The vase was too wide. The bag was too cheap. With a loud tearing sound that echoed through the room like a zipper on a body bag, the side of her orange tote split open. It didn't just rip at the seam. The material itself shredded, revealing the white cardboard-like lining beneath the fake leather. The handle snapped off, sending the bag and the vase crashing to the floor. The vase shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. Ashley stared at the ruined bag. The illusion was broken. It wasn't leather. It was plastic. It was $100 knockoff she had tried to pass off as a $10,000 investment piece. My bag, she wailed, falling to her knees and picking up the shredded orange plastic. You broke my bag. That was a Hermes. That cost $5,000. I walked over and looked down at the carnage. High-quality stitching doesn't pop like that, Ashley, I said dryly. And Hermes doesn't use cardboard for lining. You might want to get a refund from whatever trunk show you bought that from. You did this, she hissed, looking up at me with mascara running down her face. You bad luck charm. Everything you touch dies. Get up, Trey yelled from the door. We have to go. The cops are getting the cuffs out. Ashley scrambled to her feet, clutching the remains of her fake wealth to her chest. She grabbed her phone, her only real possession, and ran toward the door, kicking a shard of my crystal vase across the floor as she went. 1 minute, Henderson announced, checking his watch again. Malik was the last one left. He was standing in the center of the living room, spinning in slow circles, looking at the life he was losing. He looked at the high ceilings. He looked at the fireplace. He looked at the spot where his G-Wagon used to be, now empty except for the rain slicking the driveway. The reality was finally settling in. He wasn't leaving for a hotel. He wasn't leaving for a vacation. He was leaving forever. I am not going, he whispered, shaking his head. This is my home. My name is on the mail. Officer Miller stepped inside. Sir, you need to exit the building. Now. Malik backed away. No, I am not leaving. You can't make me. I have rights. Squatters' rights. Something. I am staying. Marcus looked at my father. Elijah gave a barely perceptible nod. Marcus moved. He didn't run. He just closed the distance in 2 strides. He grabbed Malik by the back of his collar and the seat of his pants. It wasn't a fight. It was a removal. Malik was a child in the hands of a giant. Get off me! Malik screamed, flailing his arms. Don't touch me! I will sue you! I will sue everybody! Marcus marched him to the door. Malik dug his heels in his shoes, screeching on the floor, leaving black scuff marks on the pristine wood. It was undignified. It was pathetic. It was the end of the King of Buckhead. They reached the front porch. The rain was coming down hard now, a sheets of water that blurred the streetlights. The driveway was lined with neighbors. In Buckhead, nothing goes unnoticed. The commotion, the police lights, the fleet of black SUVs, it had drawn a crowd. People were standing under umbrellas at the end of their driveways watching. The doctor from next door. The retired judge from across the street. The socialites Malik had tried so hard to impress at the club. They were all watching. Marcus threw Malik out. He didn't push him down the stairs. He just let go of him at the edge of the porch, propelling him into the rain. Malik stumbled, tried to catch his balance on the wet pavement, and failed. He went down on one knee, splashing water onto his suit pants. He looked up. He saw the neighbors. He saw the tow truck disappearing with his G-Wagon around the bend. He saw his mother crying in the passenger seat of Ashley's beat-up sedan, which was parked on the grass because the driveway was blocked. He saw Chloe's Uber driving away without him. He looked back at the house. I was standing in the doorway, flanked by my father and the security team. I was dry. I was warm. And I was holding the door handle. Tasha, he screamed over the sound of the rain. Tasha, please, I have nowhere to go. My cards are frozen. That sounds like a personal problem, Malik, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the night air. Maybe you can stay in the office. Oh, wait, you don't own that either. I stepped back and began to close the heavy oak door. Wait! Malik yelled, scrambling to his feet and running toward the porch. Wait, I love you. I paused the door open just a crack. You don't love me, Malik, I said. You love the light bill. And the lights just went out. I slammed the door. The sound was final. The lock clicked into place. The deadbolt slid home. I turned around and leaned back against the wood, taking a deep breath. The house was quiet. The screaming was muffled by the thick walls. The chaos of the last hour hung in the air like smoke, but it was clearing. My father walked over to me. He put his hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked at the empty spot on the wall where Ashley had tried to steal the sconce. I looked at the floor where the fake Birkin had died. I looked at the table where the divorce papers still sat signed and legal. "I am perfect, Daddy," I said. Marcus walked in from the side door, wiping rain from his jacket. "The perimeter is clear, Miss Tasha. They are gone." Ashley's car wouldn't start for a minute, but they got it going. "They are heading toward the highway." "Good," I said. "Change the codes, reprogram the gates, and Marcus." "Yes, ma'am. Have the cleaning crew come tonight. I want every trace of them gone by morning. I want this floor scrubbed. I want the air purified. I don't want to smell his cologne in this house ever again." "Understood." I walked into the kitchen and poured the rest of the champagne down the sink. It was flat anyway. I rinsed the glass and set it in the dishwasher. Then I walked upstairs to the master bedroom. Malik's clothes were still in the closet. His suits, his shoes, his ties. I didn't want to look at them. I grabbed a black trash bag from under the sink. I started pulling them off the hangers, handfuls of expensive fabric that he hadn't paid for. I stuffed them into the bag. I didn't fold them. I didn't care if they wrinkled. They were just rags now. I filled 5 bags. I dragged them to the balcony and dropped them over the railing into the mud below. Let him come back for them, I thought. Let him dig through the mud in the morning. I took a shower, scrubbing the day off my skin. I put on my silk robe and walked back downstairs. My father was sitting in the library reading a book. He looked up when I entered. "You did good today, Tasha," he said. I sat down opposite him. I learned from the best. The rain beat against the glass, washing the driveway clean. Malik was out there somewhere, wet, broke, and homeless. His family was crammed into a sedan that smelled like wet dog and desperation. Chloe was gone. The G-Wagon was gone. The company was gone. And I was here, in my house, with my father. And for the first time in 5 years, the air in the room was mine to breathe. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence. It was the most expensive, luxurious thing I owned, and I had bought it with patience and a signature. 2 weeks is a long time when you are waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it is an incredibly short amount of time when you are trying to hide $5 million in stolen funds. I spent those 14 days in the quiet luxury of my reclaimed home, working with my father's legal team to execute what they called the scorched earth protocol. We didn't lift a finger. We simply stopped propping up the illusions Malik had built his life on and let gravity do the rest. The collapse began on a Tuesday morning at the headquarters of Apex Solutions. Malik had gone into the office trying to maintain the facade of the unbothered CEO. He was wearing one of the few suits he had managed to salvage before I threw them off the balcony, a wrinkled navy blue number that smelled faintly of mud and desperation. He walked into his glass-walled office expecting to bully his staff into finding him some quick cash, but instead he found 3 men sitting at his conference table. They were not investors. They were forensic accountants from my father's firm. According to the report I received later, Malik tried to bluster his way through it. He demanded to know who let them in. He shouted about security. But the lead auditor simply slid a single piece of paper across the polished mahogany table. It was the demand for repayment. The clause in the original funding agreement was airtight. Upon the dissolution of the marriage or any breach of moral conduct, the low-interest seed capital converted immediately into a high-interest demand loan. "We are here to audit the books, Mr. Johnson," the auditor said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "We need to verify the assets before we begin the liquidation process." Liquidation, Malik stammered. You can't liquidate my company. We are pre-IPO. We are going to be a unicorn. The auditor didn't even look up from his laptop. You are insolvent. And based on our preliminary review of the corporate credit card statements, you are also in significant legal trouble. That was when the real nightmare started. They went through every transaction for the last 2 years. They found the dinners at Nobu that were categorized as client meetings, but were actually dates with Chloe. They found the first-class tickets to Miami. They found the lease payments for a luxury apartment in Buckhead that was listed as a satellite office, but was actually where he stashed his mistress. This isn't just bad business, the auditor told him. This is embezzlement. You used investor funds for personal enrichment. That is a felony. By noon, the local police had arrived. Not because Malik called them this time, but because my father's legal team had filed a formal criminal complaint for grand larceny and corporate fraud. Malik was led out of his own building in handcuffs. His employees, the ones he had terrorized and underpaid for years, stood in the open workspace and watched. Some of them took photos. None of them looked sad. While Malik was being processed at the Fulton County Jail, his brother Trey and sister-in-law Ashley were facing their own reckoning across town. They lived in a trendy high-rise condo in Midtown. Or rather, they occupied it. Like everything else in their lives, the condo was a mirage. Malik had told them he bought it for them as an investment property. In reality, I had purchased the unit through a shell company 3 years ago as a tax shelter and allowed them to live there rent-free because I was tired of hearing Malik whine about his brother sleeping on our couch. Ashley was in the middle of filming a home tour for her social media, trying to pivot her brand to luxury lifestyle influencer when the property manager knocked on the door. He wasn't alone. He was accompanied by 2 sheriff's deputies and a locksmith. Mrs. Johnson, the manager, said, holding up a clipboard. We have received an order of immediate eviction from the property owner. Ashley laughed nervously, holding her phone up as if live streaming would protect her. What are you talking about? My brother-in-law owns this place. He is Malik Johnson, the tech mogul. Call him. The manager sighed. We have spoken to the owner's legal representation. The owner is the Vance Family Trust. The occupancy agreement was terminated due to a violation of the morality clause and non-payment of HOA fees for the last 12 months. You have to vacate, immediately. Ashley dropped her phone. The screen cracked, mirroring the fracture in her reality. You can't do this, we have tenant rights. We need 30 days. You are not tenants, the manager corrected her. You are squatters. There is no lease on file with your names on it. You were guests, and the party is over. The scene that followed was reportedly loud enough to be heard 3 floors down. Ashley turned on Trey with the ferocity of a cornered animal. She screamed at him. She hit him with her purse. She shrieked that he had promised her a soft life, that he had lied about his brother's money, that he was a loser just like the rest of his family. You told me we were set for life, she wailed as the deputies escorted them into the hallway. You told me Malik was the cash cow. You said we never had to work again. Trey was crying, carrying a laundry basket full of sneakers. I thought he was rich Ashley. He drove a G-Wagon. How was I supposed to know he was broke? You are an idiot. Ashley screamed, her voice echoing off the elevator walls. I married an idiot. I could have married a doctor. I could have married a pro athlete. Instead, I married the brother of a fraud. They were left standing on the sidewalk, surrounded by garbage bags filled with their designer clothes. It started to rain again, just like the night they were kicked out of my house. A poetic bookend to their entitlement. Ashley got into her beat-up sedan and locked the doors, leaving Trey standing in the rain, pounding on the window, begging for a ride. She drove off, leaving her husband and his basket of sneakers on the curb. But the final and most satisfying blow landed on Mama Viola. She was the matriarch, the architect of their delusion. She sat in her small, cluttered apartment, waiting for Malik to call and tell her he had fixed everything. Instead, she got a collect call from the county jail. Malik was crying. He told her the bail was set at $500,000, because he was considered a flight risk, and the charges included embezzlement and fraud. He told her his assets were frozen. He told her nobody was coming to help. Mama Viola went into survival mode. She was a woman who had spent her life manipulating perception, believing her own lies. She went to her bedroom and opened her jewelry box. Inside, on a velvet cushion, sat the yellow diamond ring. The heirloom. The ring Chloe had left on my table. The ring I had sent back to Viola via courier, with a note that simply said, "Return to sender." She grabbed the ring and her purse and drove to the most reputable pawn shop in Atlanta. She walked in with her head held high, clutching the ring like it was the Hope diamond. "I need a loan," she told the broker, a man who had seen every kind of desperation walk through his doors. "A big one. My son is in a little trouble, but this ring will cover it. It is a family heirloom. It has been in the Johnson family for 4 generations. It is a flawless yellow diamond, worth at least $50,000. The broker took the ring. He didn't look impressed. He put a loop to his eye and examined the stone. He turned it over. He scratched the band with a file. He tested the stone with a thermal probe. He looked up at Mama Viola, his expression bored. "Ma'am, this isn't a diamond." Viola gasped. "Excuse me. Do not try to cheat me. That is a vintage canary diamond. My grandmother gave it to me." The broker shook his head. "Ma'am, this is a yellow topaz. And a low-quality one at that. It is heat-treated glass, basically. And the setting isn't gold. It is brass with a heavy gold plating that is starting to flake off right here on the inside." Viola's hands started to shake. "No, that is impossible. We are a prominent family. That ring is our legacy." The broker slid the ring back across the glass counter. "Your legacy is costume jewelry, ma'am. I can give you $40 for it. Maybe 50 if I'm feeling generous because the setting is vintage style. But that is it. It is worth more as a prop than as jewelry." Viola stared at the ring, the symbol of her superiority, the weapon she had used to make me feel small. The prize she had dangled over my head for 5 years, claiming I wasn't worthy of it. It was fake. It had always been fake. Just like her son's success, just like her status, just like her love, she had built her entire identity around a lie. She realized in that moment that her grandmother hadn't been a wealthy matriarch. She had been a woman who bought flashy trinkets to pretend she had money, just like Malik bought cars he couldn't afford. The fraud was genetic. It was passed down through the bloodline like a disease. "I need the money," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My son is in jail." "I am sorry," the broker said, turning back to his paperwork. "I run a business, not a charity. Take the 50, or take the ring." Mama Viola took the $50. She sold her family legacy for the price of a tank of gas. She walked out of the pawn shop, clutching 2 $20 bills and a 10, feeling the weight of the world crushing her spine. She drove to the jail, but $50 doesn't buy a lawyer, and it certainly doesn't cover a $500,000 bond. She sat in the waiting room, weeping not for her son, but for the death of her fantasy. She called Trey, but his phone was disconnected. She called Ashley, but it went straight to voicemail. She was alone. Malik stayed in jail. The arraignment was brutal. The evidence my father's team provided was overwhelming. The judge looked at the forensic accounting showing money spent on luxury cars and mistresses, while the business failed to pay its taxes, and shook his head in disgust. The prosecution argued that Malik was a predator who had targeted a wealthy woman and then pillaged her family's trust. They painted a picture of a man who felt entitled to other people's labor and wealth. It wasn't a hard picture to paint because it was the truth. 2 weeks after the eviction, I sat in my father's office. The audit was complete. The house was secure. The locks were changed. The codes updated, the bad energy scrubbed away by a team of professional cleaners. My father slid a report across the desk. "It is done," he said. "Malik is facing 5 to 10 years. His company has been liquidated to pay back a fraction of the loan. He has filed for personal bankruptcy, but since the debt is related to fraud, it cannot be discharged. He will owe us for the rest of his life." I looked at the report. It was just numbers. Cold, hard numbers that summed up the end of a marriage. And the family, I asked. Trey is living in a motel, my father said. Ashley filed for divorce yesterday, citing irreconcilable financial differences. She is trying to sue him for support, but you cannot get blood from a stone. Mama Viola is facing her own problems. Apparently, she took out several credit cards in your name years ago. We found the statements during the investigation. We added identity theft to the list of charges. I closed the folder. It was a clean sweep. Clean. A total demolition. I felt a strange sense of quiet. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would want to celebrate. But mostly, I just felt relief. The noise was gone. The constant low-level hum of disrespect and gaslighting had been silenced. I stood up and walked to the window looking out over the Atlanta skyline. "Thank you, Daddy," I said. "You saved yourself, Tasha," he replied. "I just provided the ammunition. You pulled the trigger." I left his office and drove back to the house in Buckhead. My house. I parked in the driveway where the G-Wagon used to be. I walked up the steps past the spot where Malik had fallen to his knees in the rain. I went inside. The house was silent. The sticky notes were gone. The Basquiat was hanging straight and proud on the wall, untouched and undamaged. I walked into the kitchen and opened a bottle of sparkling water. I sat at the island, the same spot where Malik used to sit, and lecture me about his vision for the future. I took a sip. It was crisp and cold. I pulled out my phone and blocked every number associated with the Johnson family. Malik, Trey, Ashley, Viola, Chloe. Then I opened my banking app. The balance was high, the trust was secure, my credit was perfect. I was 32 years old, I was single, I was wealthy. And for the first time in 5 years, I was the only person living in my house. I thought about Mama Viola selling her fake ring for $50. I thought about Malik sitting in a cell wearing an orange jumpsuit that definitely wasn't slimming. I smiled. Karma wasn't just a concept, it was a logistics company, and my father was the CEO. The deadweight was gone, and I had a lot of redecorating to do. I picked up my phone and called a designer. It was time to get rid of the beige. I wanted something bold, something that screamed survival, something that looked like victory. The morning sun hit the limestone railing of the balcony, warming the stone beneath my hands. 6 months ago, that same stone had been slick with rain and the tears of a man who thought he owned the world. Now it was dry. It was warm. And it was mine. I took a sip of my coffee. It was a single origin Ethiopian roast prepared by the chef I had hired 3 weeks ago. I leaned back against the railing and looked out over the property. The landscaping crew had finally finished removing the overgrown hedges Malik had insisted on keeping because he thought they looked estate-like. In their place, I had planted rows of white hydrangeas and Japanese maples. The view was open now. I could see all the way to the skyline of Atlanta shimmering in the distance like a promise. The house behind me was no longer a mausoleum of beige and gray. I had gutted the interior. The white linen sofas that Mama Viola had put her feet on were gone, donated to a charity auction. The dining table where Ashley had tried to steal my silver was replaced with a slab of live-edge walnut imported from Brazil. The walls were painted in deep jewel tones, emerald green in the library, midnight blue in the bedroom, and a rich terracotta in the kitchen. It didn't look like a bachelor pad anymore. It didn't look like a showroom for people pretending to be rich. It looked like a home. It looked like me. I walked back inside my silk robe trailing on the new hardwood floors. I paused in the hallway. The Basquiat was still there. I had moved it to a wall where it got better light away from the front door, so no stray draft or stray relative could ever touch it again. I looked at the chaotic brushstrokes, the anger and the beauty captured in paint. For a long time I felt like that painting. Valuable but misunderstood. Displayed but not seen. Now I just felt calm. People always tell you that after a divorce you will feel a phantom limb syndrome. They say you will miss the noise even if it was bad noise. They say you will wake up reaching for a body that isn't there. I never felt that, not once. Not. When I woke up in the middle of the king-size bed, I didn't reach for Malik. I stretched out. I took up the whole space. I slept diagonally. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. It was heavy with peace. It was the sound of a bank account that wasn't being drained. It was the sound of a reputation that wasn't being tarnished. I checked my phone. I had a meeting in an hour. My father and I were launching a new venture, a micro-loan fund for minority women entrepreneurs in Atlanta. We were calling it the Phoenix Fund. It was my idea. I wanted to be the person who gave women the money they needed, so they never had to depend on a man like Malik to validate their dreams. I got dressed. I didn't wear the muted colors Malik used to like the ones he said made me look classy and submissive. I put on a bright red power suit tailored to within an inch of its life. I put on gold hoops. I put on my favorite lipstick, a shade called Unapologetic. I walked downstairs. Marcus was waiting by the front door. He wasn't just security anymore. He was my driver, my confidant, and the man who made sure my coffee was ready in the car. "Good morning, Ms. Vance," Marcus said, opening the door. "You look like you are ready to buy the city." I smiled. "Just a small part of it, Marcus. Let's go." We walked out to the driveway. The G-Wagon was long gone, sold at auction to pay off a fraction of Malik's legal fees. In its place sat my new car, a Rolls-Royce Wraith in two tones, silver and black. It was excessive. It was loud. It was everything Malik would have wanted and everything he could never afford. I slid into the back seat. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing me into a capsule of silence and leather. We headed toward Midtown. The traffic on Peachtree Street was heavy as usual, a river of steel and brake lights. I looked out the window, watching the city move. I saw couples arguing in cars. I saw businessmen shouting into phones. I saw the hustle. I used to be part of that frantic energy, trying to keep up, trying to prove I was enough. Now I just glided through it. We came to a stop at a major intersection near Piedmont Park. There was construction ahead, forcing traffic into a single lane. Orange cones lined the street. "Look at that mess," Marcus muttered from the front seat. "City is always digging something up." I looked over. On the side of the road, a crew of men in bright orange vests was clearing debris from a storm drain. They were working hard, sweating in the Atlanta humidity. It was a community service detail. I could tell by the lettering on the back of their vests. Fulton County Corrections. I watched them idly. They looked miserable. They were picking up trash, pulling wet cardboard out of the gutter. And then I saw him. He was the third man in the line. He was holding a black trash bag and a metal grabber. He looked thinner. His hair, which he used to get cut every 3 days at the most expensive barber in the city, was grown out and patchy. He hadn't shaved. His skin looked gray under the harsh sunlight. It was Malik. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit. He was wearing baggy county-issued cargo pants and a high-visibility vest over a stained white t-shirt. He wasn't wearing his Gucci loafers. He was wearing heavy work boots that looked 2 sizes too big. He was bent over trying to spear a crushed soda can with his grabber. He missed. He tried again. He missed again. He cursed, kicking the can. I watched him. It was like looking at a stranger. I tried to find the anger I used to feel. I tried to find the hurt. I searched my chest for the burning sensation of betrayal that had kept me awake for so many nights. There was nothing. Just a mild curiosity, like seeing a bird fly into a window. Malik straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead with his forearm. He looked tired. He looked beaten. The arrogance that had defined his posture for 5 years was gone, replaced by the slump of a man who knows he has lost. He looked out at the traffic. He was probably looking at the cars, dreaming of the G-Wagon he used to drive, pretending he was still a king. His eyes scanned the line of vehicles. They moved past a Ford, past a BMW, and then they locked onto the Rolls-Royce. He froze. He knew this car. He knew the license plate. It was a custom plate T. Vance, Tasha Vance. He stared at the tinted window. He couldn't see me clearly, but he knew I was in there. He knew who was sitting in the back seat wrapped in air conditioning and success. He took a step toward the curb. He dropped his trash bag. His mouth opened. I could see him say my name. Tasha. He looked desperate. He looked like a man drowning who sees a lifeboat. He raised his hand a weak, tentative wave. Maybe he thought I would roll down the window. Maybe he thought I would stop. Maybe he thought after everything, after the theft and the mistress and the disrespect, that there was still a part of me that was the doormat he remembered. He took another step, his eyes pleading. He wanted me to see him. He wanted me to acknowledge his suffering. He wanted me to be angry, because anger is a connection. Anger means you still care. Marcus looked in the rearview mirror. Do you want me to drive on Ms. Tasha? The light is green. I looked at Malik one last time. I looked at the sweat stains on his shirt. I looked at the fake yellow diamond of a life he had tried to build. No, Marcus, I said. Don't rush. Let him look. Malik stepped closer, almost to the paint of the car. He pressed his hand against the air as if he could touch me through the glass. His lips moved again. Help me. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't frown. I didn't smile. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a middle finger. I simply turned my head. I looked away from him toward the skyline of the city where my name was on building directories, where my signature moved millions, where my father was waiting for me. I looked through him like he was made of glass, like he was part of the scenery, like he was a traffic cone or a discarded soda can. I saw his reflection in the window as I turned away. He crumbled. His shoulders collapsed. He realized in that second that the worst punishment wasn't jail. It wasn't bankruptcy. It wasn't humiliation. The worst punishment was irrelevance. He didn't matter to me. He wasn't a villain anymore. He was just a footnote in my biography. A bad quarter in a fiscal year. Drive, Marcus, I said. The Rolls-Royce surged forward, the engine a silent wave of power. We left the intersection. We left the construction. We left the man in the orange vest standing in the exhaust fumes of a life he could never afford. I opened my portfolio and pulled out the prospectus for the Phoenix Fund. I had work to do. I had a legacy to build. I had women to help, women who were smart and capable and just needed someone to bet on them. I thought about the last thing Malik had said to me before the police took him away. He had said I was a shadow. He had said I dimmed his light. I looked at the sun reflecting off the glass towers of Buckhead. It was blindingly bright. He was wrong. I was never the shadow. I was the source. I was the battery. I was the foundation. And without me, the structure couldn't stand. I had spent 5 years shrinking myself to fit into his pocket. I had dimmed my shine so he wouldn't feel blinded. I had walked behind him so he could feel like he was leading. Never again. I took a deep breath. The air in the car smelled of leather and fresh flowers. I used to be the shadow to let him shine, I thought. But shadows only exist when something blocks the light. He is gone now. There is nothing blocking me. Now I am the sun. I burn hot and I burn bright. And him. He is just dust. Just ash from a bridge I burned down. And the wind is blowing him away. I picked up my pen and signed the first document of the day. The ink was black and permanent. My name is Tasha Vance, and I am finally open for business. The most powerful lesson here is that shrinking yourself to fit someone else's insecurity is a recipe for disaster. Tasha dimmed her light to let Malik shine, yet he still viewed her as a burden. True security comes from financial independence and ironclad boundaries, not from sacrificing your identity to boost a fragile ego. Never build a man at the cost of your own dignity. Always protect your assets, know your worth, and remember silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. When you finally stop protecting those who don't value you, you don't just survive, you thrive. Hit like and subscribe if you believe in bossing up and never looking back.